And that, as I mentioned, the best way to understand innovation is through stories. And so what I'd like to do is share my voyage of discovery. And it all started in 1997 when I'm Jane Doe from Reseda, and I get Smithsonian Magazine. And the January Smithsonian came in, and they were profiling a group of people out in the field trying to erect a 40-ton obelisk. And they were pushing and pulling and ramps and inclines and sand and Nile, and nothing worked. They got it to about 40 degrees, and they said they couldn't get it any further. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to think of something. But I'm not going to try to think of pushing or pulling, because better minds than mine have tried that. And I said, well, what are the current theories? Well, ramps, levers, aliens, harmonic sound waves. My favorite is the manual labor theory, where you get thousands of men pushing rocks uphill in 106-degree heat. We can't get 100 senators to do anything together, let alone thousands of slaves. So let's take a look at the megaliths of antiquity. Your average pyramid stone was weighing about 2.5 tons. Your obelisks were 40 to 450 tons. And if you look around the world, you see these megaliths all over the world, in Malta and Easter Island and the pyramids of South and Central America. Well, let's take a look at one obelisk where we know exactly how it was raised. It's the 450-ton obelisk at St. Peter's. And they raised that in the 1500s, and they used hundreds and hundreds of men. They had horses, they had steel, they had pulleys. And this technology, the Egyptians, when they built the pyramids, had not domesticated horses. They didn't have metal. But that's what they used. But what did they have? What did they have? Well, Egypt suffered many plagues, and Egypt, like UND, was infested with engineers. And these people worked morning, noon, and night, as that most engineers do, trying to figure out a better, faster, easier way to make things happen. And if we look at what Herodotus said, Herodotus, as we know, was a Greek historian who wandered the world asking people their oral traditions. And he asked the Egyptians, how did you build an obelisk? Oh, we lifted the stones from one level to the next. We lifted them. And I said, well, that's really interesting. And if you take a look at the Egyptians, before they laid the first cornerstone of a pyramid, before they laid the first cornerstone, they spent 10 years building a road. 10 years building a road. And I figured anybody that puts that much work and effort into building a road probably thought a little bit about the best way to build a pyramid. So I packed my brain, and what's the next step in innovation after you pack your brain? Nothing. You just park it in your subconscious. And I got to thinking, I'm a Norwegian American, can't you tell? Tall, blonde, blue-eyed. So Viking lore is mother's milk to us. And I got to thinking about Captain Oleg, the sneaky Viking who conquered Constantinople. Constantinople had wine, women, jewels, everything a good Viking would want. But it also had the chain of the Bosporus across the bay. If he took his longship across that chain, rip out his hull, sink like a rock, drown like a rat, no way to get into Valhalla. So what he did, he took his longship around to the land side, put his longship on log rollers, raised his sails, and sailed overland into the city gates. Conquered Constantinople. Eureka! My eureka moment. The guys on Easter Island are sailors. The guys that sailed the Bluestones to Stonehenge are sailors. The Egyptians are sailors. Is it possible that they use this technology to build pyramids? Well, what does Egypt have? Let's take a look. What do they have? They've got the sand, duh. They have the Nile, group duh. And they have the 1,000 winds of Egypt, as reliable as the rising of the Nile. So I got a hold of Ed Teets. He's a NASA meteorologist. And I go, is it windy in Egypt? Well, he did a study, and he said, yeah, about 20% of the time, you're going to get the wind speeds that you need. So all of a sudden, ancient mythology took on a whole new meaning. One of my favorite quotes from one of the legends as how Stonehenge was built is that Uther Pendragon moved the stones one night out of Ireland in a whirlwind. I always thought that was a legend. What if it's true? Merlin, by the way, is a Welsh word for sky god. Look at Easter Island. These people invented the first kite sails that don't require masts. Did the Egyptians know how to sail? Absolutely. They're credited with inventing the sail. And their sails were made out of reinforced flax or wool. Well, now it's June. I got the June Smithsonian. And they profiled a kite festival in Washington, D.C. And they were talking about this one kite that was shaped like an octopus. And this one kite had a 1-ton pole. One kite, 1 ton. And you see this kite is not designed for efficiency of lift. It's designed to look like an octopus. They also had a kite shaped like a trilobite that in a 5-mile-an-hour wind, 5 miles an hour, they had to anchor this kite with 7 tons. They had to anchor it with a semi-truck. And the interesting thing about kites is you don't just get pull, you get lift. You can have something lift almost straight up. Like, wow, this is really interesting. Oops, sorry, wrong way. Well, did the Egyptians have what they need to make kites? Yeah, they had cedar, which is strong, flexible, and easily split into lengths, perfect for making kites. Lousy for log rollers, because that wood is very, very soft, and it's easily crushed under 2-ton stones. And you look at, there should be some economic support for this theory. Well, there were only 2 industries controlled by Pharaoh. One was the sale and manufacture of papyrus, that was his cash cow, and the next was the making of linen. If you've got to move 2.5 million pyramid stones, you're going to need somebody as powerful as Pharaoh to help make sure you can sew the flax, reap it, red it, and weave it. Did the Egyptians have rope? Yep, this is from the Cairo Museum. They used hemp rope, which is the strongest natural fiber, for making rope. Well, now it's time to break out the slide rules. So we had a young man who holds a black belt in calculus run some numbers, and we figured if we're going to erect a 450-ton obelisk, if you use the slave method, you're going to need 6,500 men, a 3,500 or 3,000-foot ramp in several days. If you use the Charlton Heston method, the sandpit method, you're going to need half as many folks, but you still need the ramp. But a kite, maybe 16 people, some kites, some pulleys, a tower, and a couple hours. Well, just as Goddard started with handheld rockets before he went to moon rockets, I said, I'm going to try it. I'm going to try it. So I found myself a 400-pound obelisk, which is heavy enough to be cumbersome, but small enough to be maneuverable. Bought every kind of kite. I bought Delta kites, box kites, parafoil kites, and we went out in the field with our 400-pound obelisk, and I attached, the kite that worked the best was a parafoil, which has no structure at all. It just has inflated air baffles. And we went out in a 25-mile-an-hour wind, which is not too bright, because as the wind speed goes up geometrically, the lift capacity goes up, as the wind speed increases arithmetically, the lift capacity increases geometrically. So we attached one kite to this parafoil, one parafoil kite to this 400-pound obelisk, and pulled the obelisk up, over, and started dragging it and 2 people downfield. Then we attached a parafoil to either end of a redwood beam, picked up the beam, started dragging it and 2 people downfield. The last question is, how do you get 2 million pyramid stones from the quarry to the pyramid? We attached one kite to our 400-pound obelisk, put it on log rollers, whoosh! Thing took off so fast we had to run to keep up with it. Now, they say out of great chaos comes great learning. But when you're out in the field, I was convinced that out of great chaos comes more chaos. It was a 25-mile-an-hour wind. The kite line would slice through my leather gloves and slice my hand open. Almost lost my hand. I said, there's no way they did this. They can't hold the kites if this is what's happening. There's got to be a better way to control kite line. So I started looking through the hieroglyphs, and I noticed everybody was holding an ankh. You weren't cool unless you were holding an ankh. And I said, you know what? That looks like awful lot like a figure 8 or carabiner that rock climbers use to control line. So I bought one. It works right-handed. It works left-handed. These rock climbers were showing me 6 different ways to do this. And sure enough, in the hieroglyphs, everywhere you look, there's rope or line.